The fact there was soon no more space did nothing to stop those struggling to reach the train doors. Children were passed above heads and then through windows. Others waited patiently, bewildered and confused.
It's the worst refugee crisis in Europe since the Second World War. Footage today showing refugees and migrants desperate to board a train, which they hoped, without any certainty, was bound for Germany. The train was later stopped by police, and the people on board told they were neither going to Germany nor to Austria. At one point, a migrant family lay down on the tracks in protest, according to ITV News, when they were told they would be transferred to a Hungarian refugee camp. Some families were ultimately allowed to reboard that particular train, but at this hour, it is unclear whether it was going to resume its course. All of those people appear to be in limbo, still waiting. And that is just one of the heart-wrenching, dramatic scenes out of Hungary, which has become one of the epicenters of a crisis involving hundreds of thousands of people from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, from Libya, Eritrea, and Nigeria, fleeing war and poverty, which has become a political crisis in Europe as countries are fighting over what to do and who should take responsibility. And that crisis is no longer limited to the mainland Europe. In Britain, the picture of this drowned Syrian Kurdish boy, now identified as 3-year-old Aylan Kurdi, galvanized a public call to action. And today, the British Prime Minister seemed to bow to that pressure, agreeing to allow more Syrian refugees into the country. The number not yet finalized. Canada also finds itself under scrutiny after the remaining family of Aylan Kurdi said they applied for and were denied asylum in Canada. Canadian government says they have no record of that. The Kurdi family was from a city called Kobani. It's where the Kurds made a remarkable, courageous stand against ISIS in Syria. And here's what that city looked like before the war and what it looks like now. Again, before and after. So if the question is, what would make a family risk their lives to flee to another country? This is what the answer is. The question of what other nations should be doing applies to every wealthy nation, from England to Canada to the U.S. And joining me now, Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas. And Congressman Castro is someone whose mother came to this country, who comes from a lineage of people that moved from one place to another, not fleeing war in that particular case. What is your reaction to watching this unfold in Europe?
Sure. Well, my grandmother came here in 1922 as a young orphan, and the images coming out of Europe are just absolutely heartbreaking. Many of them shock the conscience. The image of the 3-year-old boy who died off the Turkish coast and that soldier carrying his body, and that was on the front page of so many newspapers today. And I think, you know, I've got to imagine played a part in the UK changing its tone and agreeing to accept more refugees. And I think that the United States and Canada should follow suit.
Let's press on that, because we saw what happened politically in this country when there was a wave of arguably refugees or migrants coming from Central America, many of them children, many of them women. People freaked out, right? Should the
Yeah, no, Chris, there's no question.
Yeah.
The politics are very difficult. Even last summer, before Donald Trump started stoking fears about an invasion of immigrants, the politics were tough even a year ago when 68,000 migrants, most of them women and children, came from Central America. I think, you know, this is where the politics and the political tone in the country really does make a difference, because a Donald Trump in United States politics makes it harder for the United States government and for its leaders to accept more of these refugees, which I think morally they should.
Okay, so I think there's leadership here that can be provided. The 14 senators wrote a letter earlier this year saying we should be taking more. We took 1,000 Syrian refugees last year. It looks like 8,000 in the coming year. How many should we be taking, and are you gonna call for us to take more?
Oh, absolutely, and consider this part of that call. I think that, you know, of course, Congress has been out of session since July 30th, at least the House of Representatives has been. But you know, as soon as we get back on September 8th, I believe that we should have hearings on this, and I think many of us will take action. And I think the United States should step up and take a stronger role in accepting thousands of these refugees. You know, when we think of a refugee today, I think part of the challenge for the country is that we're still thinking of people who were fleeing communist dictators in the 60s and 70s. You think about all of the thousands of Cubans who came fleeing Fidel Castro and the Vietnamese who came after the Vietnam War. And, you know, in our minds, we still think of people fleeing these communist dictators. But really, the situation around the world has changed a lot since then. That's very obvious, but I don't know that that has made it into our consciousness.
You know, you talk about the political context, which I think is a great point. One thing that occurs to me is one of the things you hear from people on the other side of the immigration debate, particularly conservatives and Republicans, is, look, we love legal immigration. We don't like illegal immigration. We don't like people coming not through the proper channels. This is an opportunity, it seems to me, to call that bluff and say, look, let's actually legally expand the number of refugees we're taking, put in process to, you know, bring people, resettle them. We'll know who these folks are. This is not just people coming willy-nilly. We can do that, but let's actually step up and take lots more people.
No, I think that's absolutely right. Now, another part of the debate that we get into when you have refugees from the Middle East, for example, is the very stringent security protocols that they have to go through to be allowed refugee status in this country. And there has been a pushback to allowing thousands and thousands of people to come here from the Middle East because of that. You know, there are FBI checks, Homeland Security checks, and so on and so on. And I expect that that will be part of the debate in the coming weeks.
All right, Congressman Joaquin Castro, thank you very much.